You see, this is why I never want Garth to come back to the show, because I know if he came back, they'd just kill him, and I'd much rather have him living a happy life with his cute werewolf wife in Wisconsin than have him come back just to get the axe like they did with Missouri in this episode. So Robert, or Bobo Burns, wrote this one, and he's a writer that a good percentage of the fan base seems to be in love with because he writes good dialogue. Sam and Dean are in character. In his episodes, the supporting characters are given a lot to do, especially Castiel. Like, they're not just supplements for Sam and Dean. There's usually not any glaring continuity fuck-ups in his episodes. Burns writes a lot of subtext, and he puts in a lot of parallels and references to past episodes as well, so they feel very much a part of Supernatural as a whole. He likes to sprinkle in a good measure of Destiel, and you can definitely see his strength as a writer in this episode, but there's also in this episode very much the reason why I would never call him one of my favorite TV writers. It's because Burns writes like he wants to be Joss Whedon. I mean, honestly, every staff writer on TV right now has seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer and is very much influenced by it. I mean, I'd say the CW DC shows owe just as much to Mutant Enemy as they do to DC comic books. I mean, Robbie Thompson, who left Supernatural after season 11, who was another fandom darling and a writer I like a lot, also watched Buffy and loved it, but Robbie had his own creative voice, and Ben Edlund, who actually worked with Joss Whedon and was on the staff of 2 Mutant Enemy shows, used Buffy speak in Supernatural and all of that, and you can tell that there's influences that he pulled. I can see Illyria's influence from Angel in On the Head of a Pin, you know, the season 4 episode that Edlund wrote, but still, Ben Edlund very much has his own creative voice and style that you can't mistake for another writer. So Edlund is very much his own writer versus just trying to be someone else. And looking at Patience in this episode, I can see Buffy's fingerprints all over her. She was introduced by a prophetic nightmare, like Buffy in Welcome to the Hellmouth. Her friend repeating the same lines as in the dream also reminded me of Surprise, where Joyce says, "Do you really think you're ready, Buffy?" That's totally what that reminded me of. I don't mind stuff like this when I'm reading fan fiction, but Burns is a professional writer. This is his job. I'm sorry to make this comparison, but in a way, I feel like he's like Cassandra Clare. I mean, Robert Burns is at least 10 times more talented than she is, but still, that's not a great comparison to make. And Burns is just capable of so much more than doing this paint-by-number writing that he likes to do. And I just really wish he did more of his own thing. Also, the idea of a killer that goes after psychics really reminds me of the X-Files episode Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, and Burns really beat the Kripke drum in this episode with Sam telling Jack that he has free will, which was, of course, Eric Kripke's big thesis statement during his time on Supernatural. So, what does Burns have to offer in this episode? Well, thankfully, he does offer something. The one bit of writing that I can definitely tell came from him was the ending conversation between Patience, Dean, and Jody. It's very obvious that a gay person wrote this, which Burns is, in case you didn't know, with Jody's whole speech to Patience about how you can't pretend to be something you're not for other people's benefit because it'll make other people happy is really so gay. It was practically waving a rainbow flag. Something else that I liked in this episode a lot was how Burns had Dean and Sam move past the Dean pessimist, Sam optimist dichotomy to have Dean call out Sam's kindness as Sam possibly just using Jack to get Mary back. And it could also be possible that Sam could be using Jack for any redemption Sam still feels like he needs to do, where Sam fell prey to the dark side, so he's trying to make sure Jack doesn't do that, so Sam can get rid of like any leftover guilt that he has. And psychologically, Sam might not even be aware that he's feeling this way. That's really interesting. And I like how they made it clear that freak is still a touchy word for Sam. So, right, I do like Burns, but he could shine so much brighter as a writer if he didn't live in the shadows of others. And of course, I have to say that I appreciate very much how they're showing the difference in this episode between how Sam is dealing with Cass's death and Dean is dealing with Cass's death, where they're really presenting this as something that Dean will never fully get over. It's so devastated him. And Sam just isn't as devastated as Dean about it, where the show for years now has been doing this thing where it's like, Sam and Cass's relationship is different than Dean and Cass's relationship. How is it different? It's just this big unanswered question, just like what broke the connection. So, I mean, as a Destiel shipper, of course, I eat shit like that up. It's both great and frustrating at the same time because there's still no answer to what broke the connection. So anyway, and I am still looking forward to Wayward Sisters because Patience has a very solid foundation for a character and she didn't do anything to annoy me, so yay. I have some criticisms of this episode, of course, like how the hell did Patience beat that Wraith? Like, one line about self-defense class or being a student of a martial art would have cleared that right up. Does being psychic also give you fighting skills now, or what? I don't know. Missouri also seemed to have some extra powers now that she didn't have before, but I suppose that's not a huge deal. And again, the show pulls new mythology out of nowhere to show where Cass is, but the show has always just pulled new mythology out of the ether whenever it's needed to, so that's nothing new. Anyway, what did you guys all think? Please tell me, someone talk to me. I'm cool. Sayonara, auf Wiedersehen.